Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7.
It's great to be here.
Today we're going to take a look at history and maybe, just maybe, break it. We're going to unpack a premise that sounds, well, frankly, it sounds wild. What if the history of monotheism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam isn't about divine revelation at all?
What if it's really a history of political revolution, of coups, counter-revolutions, and, at its core, sun worship just wearing different masks?
Exactly. The idea that figures like Akhenaten, Moses, Jesus, even Muhammad are all just players in one long, continuous struggle.
A struggle between Aten, the visible sun, the one god, and Amon, the hidden god, the god of the priests.
And that modern religion is basically a state project built on these forgotten pagan roots. We're diving into a book called Din Vidivrim, which is Religion and Revolution by Orhan Gökdemir.
And it's not a theology book, not at all. It's more like a forensic investigation.
A crime scene investigation into the political origins of God.
It treats God not as a divine being, but as a political tool, a mechanism on the ground.
Okay, so before we get into that forensic evidence, and believe me, when we get to the volcano god part, you are going to want to stick around. I just have one quick favor. If you like my channel, please subscribe and press the like button. It really does help us keep digging into these, well, controversial ideas.
So let's set the stage here. The core idea, the thesis, it all revolves around power.
Right. We've all heard that classic line from Marx that religion is the sigh of the oppressed, you know, a comfort.
It is. But Gökdemir argues it's also the primary weapon of the state. And to understand that, we have to go way back to the very first monotheist.
And it wasn't Abraham.
No, it was an Egyptian pharaoh, Akhenaten.
So this whole story starts in Egypt, 14th century BC.
That's where the trail begins. And before Akhenaten, the real power in Egypt wasn't really the pharaoh, it was the priesthood of the god Amon.
Amon, meaning the hidden one, right?
Exactly. And that name is everything. If your god is hidden, what do you need to reach him?
A middleman, a priest, a translator.
Precisely. The hidden god creates this massive bureaucracy of priests. They control the magic, the rituals, the paths to the afterlife. They owned huge amounts of land. They were a deep state.
So Akhenaten comes to power, and this isn't some spiritual awakening.
No, it's a political coup, a revolution from above.
He just bans Amon.
He bans Amon, closes the temples, fires the priests. He declares there is only one god, Akhenaten, the physical disk of the sun.
But why the sun? Why not, I don't know, a river god or a mountain god?
Think about that power move. The sun is visible. It's right there. Anyone can see it. You don't need a priest to interpret the sun for you.
Right, it cuts out the middleman.
Completely. And who is the son of the sun? Like the representative of that light on earth.
The pharaoh himself?
Exactly. Akhenaten was saying, you don't need them, you just need me. It's the ultimate centralization of power. He even banned magic and the whole Osiris myth about the afterlife. It was a move toward, you could almost say, materialism, worshipping the actual energy source of life.
But you don't fire the deep state and expect them to go quietly.
No, and it failed, spectacularly. The people, the oppressed, they hated this new, cold, distant god. They missed their magic, their old comforts.
So when Akhenaten dies...
The counter-revolution is swift and brutal. The Elman priests come back, they destroy his new city, Amarna, and they literally try to erase his name from history.
And this is where King Tut comes in, isn't it?
It is. We all know him as Tutankhamun, but that wasn't his birth name.
It was Tutankhamun.
Living image of Aten. The priests forced him to change it to Tutankhamun. It was a public signal. The revolution is dead. The hidden god has won.
But, and this is where the story takes a huge turn, the idea didn't die. This one god concept had to go somewhere.
And that's where Moses enters the picture.
Okay. Now, this is the part of the deep dive that's, well, it's going to challenge the story most of us know.
Right. The traditional story is that Moses is a Hebrew slave.
But Gökdemir, and he's following Freud's work here, suggests something else entirely. What if Moses wasn't a slave at all?
What if he was an Egyptian noble? Maybe even a priest from that failed Etanist religion.
So the Exodus isn't a slave revolt. It's an exile.
That's the theory. The one God followers are being persecuted in Egypt after the revolution failed. So their leader, this Moses figure, leads them out to preserve the faith.
Okay, is there any, actual evidence for that? Or is it pure speculation?
There's some compelling circumstantial evidence. Linguistically, the Hebrew word for Lord is Adonai.
Which sounds a lot like Adonai.
It's almost identical. And then you have the customs, things like circumcision, avoiding pork. These were ancient Egyptian priestly customs long before they were Jewish law.
So Moses was basically enforcing the strict elitist rules of the Egyptian court on his desert followers?
It seems that way. But hold on, if Moses is bringing this peaceful, abstract sun god with him,
Where does all the fire and brimstone come from? The God of the Old Testament is not a quiet sun disk. He's a warrior, a jealous God.
and that is the two Moses theory. Honestly, it solves so many contradictions.
Okay, break that down for me.
The theory argues you have two totally separate traditions that get smashed together. On one hand, you have the Egyptian Moses, the intellectual. He brings the universal, abstract, one God idea from Atonism.
Okay.
But on the other hand, you have a local Midianite leader who worshipped a tribal god named Yahweh. And Yahweh was not abstract. He was a nature deity,
What kind of nature deity?
a storm and volcano god.
A volcano god.
Think about the imagery. A pillar of cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night, the mountain shaking with thunder and smoke, a consuming fire. That is pure volcanic language.
That makes a scary amount of sense. So this intellectual state god from Egypt crashes into this fierce volcano god from the desert.
Exactly. And the text suggests it wasn't a peaceful merger. There's even a hint that the original Egyptian Moses might have been killed by his own people. His religion was too strict, too foreign.
So what happened?
The Levites, the priestly class, they performed a kind of synthesis. They took the one God philosophy and wrapped it in the terrifying, powerful personality of the volcano god.
And you end up with a god who is supposed to be the creator of the whole universe.
Well, who also gets really, really angry like a volcano and cares intensely about tribal politics. It's a hybrid, a very powerful political tool.
Which brings us to another word for God. The book talks a lot about El.
Right. El, or Elohim, was just the generic word for the high god across the entire region. The Canaanites worshipped El. You see it everywhere in names. Gabriel, Michael, Israel.
So monotheism wasn't so much a new idea as it was a hostile takeover.
It was consolidation, taking all the local gods and folding them into one big one, the big boss, El.
So let's jump forward 1,000 years or so, Rome. And Rome has a big problem.
A huge problem. The empire is massive, but it's spiritually falling apart. You've got hundreds of different cults, different gods. It's a mess.
And the Emperor Constantine looks at all this and thinks,
One empire needs one god.
so Christianity becomes the new Atonism, another state project.
Exactly. Constantine was a political genius, not a pious convert. He saw this little Jewish messianic cult, this sigh of the oppressed, and realized he could weaponize it. He could use it as glue for the empire.
But he had to rebrand it for a Roman audience.
He had to make it look familiar. This is where the syncretism comes in. The book argues that the Jesus we know from the church is a composite character, a mashup.
A greatest hits of pagan gods.
You got it. You want a god who dies and is resurrected. Here's some Osiris from Egypt. You need a big winter festival. Let's take December 25th, the birthday of Solar Victus, the unconquered sun.
And your holy day.
Let's move the Sabbath to Sunday, the sun's day.
It's literally hiding in plain sight.
Even the core theology, the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, it's an echo of the Egyptian triad. Osiris, his wife Isis, and their son Horus.
So the Council of Nicaea wasn't really a theological debate.
It was a board meeting. It was the state standardizing the product to better control the masses.
This view is incredibly cynical. But it does explain why the structure of the church ended up looking so much like the Roman Empire.
Because it is the Roman Empire, just wearing different clothes. It's the Amon system all over again. The priests are back, the hierarchy is back, the hidden god has returned.
And the cycle repeats. A revolution tries to simplify God, and then the establishment complicates it all over again. Which brings us to Islam.
Now this is fascinating. The standard story of pre-Islamic Arabia, the Jahiliyyah, is that it was this age of godless ignorance.
Then the book says no.
Gökdemir says no, they were deeply religious, they just had too many gods. They worshipped Allah as the high god, sure, but they also had his daughters, Alat, Manat, Uzza. It was a divine bureaucracy.
And the Kaaba was at the center of this.
Long before Islam. The Black Stone, the Hasar Izvet, was a sacred object for centuries. The book speculates the Kaaba might have been an astronomical temple.
To what?
The 7 celestial bodies you can see with the naked eye. The sun, the moon, and the 5 visible planets. 7 bodies.
Wait, 7? Is that why people circle the Kaaba 7 times?
That's the forensic connection the text makes. You are ritually reenacting the orbits of the planets around the central star. It's coded sun worship.
So Muhammad's revolution is... it's the Akhenaten move all over again.
In a political sense, yes.
Yeah.
He's the revolutionary. He goes in, he smashes the idols, clears out the daughters and the intermediaries. He says, no, just the one God. It's a move to centralize power and unify the tribes.
But the stone is still there.
The stone remains. And this is what Gökdemir calls the tragedy of all these revolutions. You can smash the idols made of wood, but you can't smash the human need for something tangible.
The ox would draw God as an ox.
Exactly. People need a focal point. So the Ammon element, the intermediaries, the saints, the shrines, that always creeps back in. The text even points to mystical traditions like Alevism, where Ali is described in solar terms. Ali is the sun.
And never really goes away.
It just finds a new mask.
So we seem to be stuck in this loop. We want the simplicity of the one God, the state, the order, but we crave the mystery of the many gods.
And that's where the book drops the last piece of the puzzle, the escape hatch, if you will, the figure of Hermes.
Or Thoth in Egypt, or Enoch and Idris in the Bible and Quran.
The universal prophet. The argument is that while the masses were fighting over Yahweh versus Baal or Jesus versus Apollo, the elites had their own separate tradition.
The religion of wisdom.
Yes, the Hermetic tradition. They knew that the gods were just metaphors for natural forces. Hermes represents science, writing, astronomy. The source draws a sharp line between what it calls organized ignorance, state religion, and genuine enlightenment.
Organized ignorance, that is harsh.
But look at who held the power. The priest knew how to predict an eclipse. They knew astronomy, and they used that secret knowledge to control the people who didn't. Hermeticism was the underground river of actual science.
So when we get to the European Enlightenment in the 18th century...
The book calls it Atheism's second attempt. Copernicus, Newton. They were putting the sun, Aten, back at the center of the universe where it belonged. They were destroying the hidden world with observable facts.
So science is the true monotheism.
In a way, it's the idea that there is one set of universal laws, one source of energy, and you don't need a priest to interpret it for you. It's the ultimate revolution against the hidden.
This whole investigation leaves us in such a strange place. We look at our modern world and we think we're secular.
But are we? That's the big so what here. Gökdemir argues that religion and the state are inseparable. They're two faces of the same system of control. We haven't escaped the cycle.
We just think we have.
Do we? Our tallest buildings are no longer cathedrals, they're corporate towers, still reaching for the sky. We organize our entire lives by the solar calendar. Our concept of truth is enlightenment. It's all light. It's all solar.
We are still sun worshippers.
We are. We just changed the name. We call it progress, or the market, or the state. But deep down, we are still looking up at that disk of light and structuring our world around it.
And maybe that's the final uncomfortable thought, that our deepest beliefs aren't divine truths. They're political fossils, remnants of ancient power struggles we don't even remember.
It forces you to look at a flag or a skyscraper or a corporate logo and ask, is this God? Or is this just Caesar in a modern suit?
A huge question to leave you with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Keep questioning.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Deeper by 6-7.